An imperial decree of arranged marriage sealed two unions for the Yuan family. One daughter married the newly crowned top scholar as his wife, while the other married a fallen prince as his secondary consort. My younger sister rushed headlong to snatch up the top scholar. But little did she know that he had a young cousin who looked down on her, the legitimate wife, with utter disdain. In a fit of anger, she sold her cousin, but this drove a wedge between the couple. Before long, her brother, the top scholar, lost a political struggle and was dismissed from office, and her younger sister lived out her days in poverty and ill health. Yet my husband, that prince from a fallen royal house, seized the opportunity to successfully seize the throne and made me a consort. Second only to the emperor, my younger half-sister was consumed with jealousy toward me. She used the pretext of visiting me in the palace to stab me in the chest. When I opened my eyes again, Father was holding the imperial edict and telling us to make a choice. My younger half-sister didn't hesitate to agree to marry the prince, and she even gave me a contemptuous smile. From now on, I'll be a consort. It turns out she had been reborn. 2. Main text. This is a marriage arranged by the imperial court, so you cannot refuse. However, the imperial edict does not specify who is to marry whom, so you may choose for yourselves. Father sat at the rosewood table, waiting for our reply. I clutched my chest. The pain of a sharp object piercing my body still felt as though it were real, yet everything before my eyes was utterly real. I was reborn on the very day the imperial decree arranging my marriage was issued. This imperial edict specifically named two husbands. One was Xin Yan, the newly crowned top scholar who had just been granted an official post. He was said to be strikingly handsome and talented, having lost both parents at an early age. One was Prince Jian, Yu Yun. Although he held the title of prince, he had long been on the fringes of power and had fallen on hard times. What was even more critical was that he already had a principal consort. If she were to marry him, she would have to settle for the role of a secondary consort in a past life. As soon as my younger sister heard about these two, she lashed out. A sissy like you is only fit to be a woman. Marrying a down-and-out prince is already a favor to you. I, of course, will be the wife of the top scholar. But now, she knelt obediently on the ground. After all, the Prince of Jian is a member of the imperial family. Our Yuan family cannot bring disgrace upon the imperial house. As the eldest daughter, I am willing to marry the Prince of Jian as a secondary consort without a word of objection. Father stroked his beard and kept praising his daughter for how much she had grown. It's settled then. Shijia, you should get ready to marry Xin Yan. But my younger sister turned to look at me, a sneer on her face, her lips moving silently. It's my turn to be the imperial concubine. It turns out she had been reborn. 2. Father sighed that daughters grow up too fast. Now that she was of marriageable age, Shirlan had become much more mature. But I understand that Wan Shirlan isn't doing this for the sake of the Wan family's future. She just wants to rise above everyone else. In her previous life, she looked down on Prince Jian for his lack of status and refused to be a secondary wife, insisting she would marry the newly crowned top scholar. At a young age, Xin Yan had been personally selected by the emperor as the top scholar in the imperial examinations. Just as his fortunes were soaring, his parents passed away, and he was spared the burden of caring for his in-laws. Countless daughters of officials in the capital regarded him as the ideal husband, but he had a young cousin at home, his only close relative, and she simply could not accept Xin Yan's marriage. Naturally, Wan Shirlan didn't think much of her cousin either. The argument between the two grew more heated, and my cousin actually said, "If it weren't for you, why wouldn't my cousin marry me?" It drove Wan Shirlan absolutely crazy. One day, while Xin Yan was away on business, Wan Shirlan summoned a pimp to the mansion, had her cousin bound, and sold her into the lowest class brothel. When Xin Yan returned and rushed to look for her, his cousin had already passed away. Her death a tragic sight. Xin Yan flew into a rage on the spot. But Wan Jiaqiong held him back and prevented him from divorcing his wife. From that day on, however, he never spoke to Wan Shirlan again. Soon after, Xin Yan's close friend, the crown prince, was accused of treason, and Xin Yan was demoted from his post with no hope of reinstatement. From then on, the couple lived in poverty in a barren land. But after I married Prince Jian, I discovered that although he held a marginal position, he was extremely cunning. After the crown prince was executed, he incited the remaining princes to fight over the position of crown prince, then seized the throne in a single stroke while they were off guard. As a longtime servant of the prince's household, I was naturally granted the title of imperial consort. Suddenly, everyone was saying that I was so lucky, that I was born under a lucky star, and that I must have accumulated good karma over several lifetimes. Wan Shilan, however, was consumed by jealousy. Just as I was announcing her entry into the palace, she plunged a dagger into my chest and was herself apprehended by the imperial guards. My foolish younger sister. Did she really think that by marrying Yu Yun, she could live out her days in peace and comfort as a consort? The prince's mansion isn't exactly a pleasant place to stay. Princess Jian is all smiles on the outside but has a heart of stone. It's best to subject her to the petty torments of a concubine. As for Yu Yun himself, he's naturally cruel if you're not careful. He'll beat you senseless, Wan Shilan, for the rest of your life. You'd better get used to Theblising Soft being the Prince of Jian's concubine. The day of my wedding was fast approaching. I've been busy arranging all sorts of dowry items lately, and I'm feeling absolutely thrilled. In my eyes, Qin Yan wasn't exactly the ideal match for marriage, but in his previous life, he had consistently offered advice on matters of public welfare. Right up until the end, he stood by the former crown prince, even at the risk of defying the emperor, and sacrificed his promising future to be exiled to the countryside. The way he treats both his people and his friends is proof enough that he is a man of integrity. It's better to treat him with mutual respect than to be tormented day and night by Prince Jian and his wife. At worst, I'll just go with him to some remote backwater, or I'll let him be with his cousin and take the divorce papers home. Although these two outcomes may not sound very appealing, they have brought freedom and tangible benefits. After all, my mother came from a wealthy merchant family in the south, so I grew up surrounded by business and learned the ropes from a young age. Even my grandfather praised me as a prodigy. Humph. I've got plenty of money. As long as I can spend it however I want, where couldn't I live the high life? Before we knew it, the day of our wedding had arrived. The festivities went on all day long, and it wasn't until Qin Yan had finished the banquet in the front hall and stepped into the bridal chamber that things finally quieted down. He silently lifted my veil. His handsome face betrayed no emotion. It's only natural. After all, even though I'm his legally wedded wife, I'm still a complete stranger to him and with his cousin, whose relationship to him is unclear. Hanging around, he's certainly not going to give me a warm welcome. No sooner had the name been mentioned than, the very next second, a piercing scream erupted at the door. Qin Yan looked extremely troubled, as if he didn't know how to begin. I was ready for this, so I motioned to the maid to let her in. Suddenly, a girl burst in like a ball of fire, threw herself at Qin Yan's legs, and began to cry. She looked to be about 11 or 12 years old. Her voice had changed slightly from crying, and I could faintly make out words like, "Cousin, don't marry her." My eardrums were practically aching from the noise, so without a second thought, I stood up and shouted for everyone to be quiet. Your cousin didn't do anything to me, so there's no need for you to be so upset. Likewise, I don't have any feelings for your cousin either. From now on, we'll mind our own business and live our lives in peace. Don't come crying and making a scene in front of me anymore. Do you understand? As soon as those words were spoken, the room fell silent. Qin Yan was the first to react. He quickly had someone help his cousin back to her room. His face betrayed a mix of shock and gratitude. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Luer is young and doesn't know any better. Thank you, madam, for not holding it against her. I truly apologize. I won't be staying the night." I was overjoyed inside, but I couldn't let it show on my face. All I could say was, "You've worked so hard, my lord. I fully understand the difficulties you face." Before leaving, he added, "I'll be sleeping in the study." I couldn't care less about this. I just want to politely ask him to leave. This time, I'm really in for a treat. When I woke up, I paid no heed to the various expressions on the servants' faces. I simply summoned the steward and the bookkeeper to question them. The household had never had a matriarch before. Qin Yan had single-handedly managed both the inner and outer courtyards. Early that morning, he sent someone to bring me the keys to the courtyard and instructed them to tell me that all matters concerning the inner courtyard, as well as the estates and farmlands outside, were now under my management. I heard that cousin got a good scolding. And she's been unusually quiet today. Great. And just like that, my happy life began. The Shin family was small, with few servants, so it was quite easy to manage, even though some of them had their own hidden agendas. Seeing that I held all the power, they all bowed to my will. As for the assets of those industrial estates, they're a piece of cake for any single deal I've handled is bigger than this. And managing these on the side wouldn't be much trouble at all, with no in-laws to cater to and no need to go out of my way to please a man. The only thing left was my cousin Ji Lu, who would occasionally make a snide remark or two, so I simply hired a tutor for her and sent her to school, which finally gave me some peace and quiet. Life as a god must be just like this. On this day, the wife of Minister Liu hosted a flower viewing party, inviting all the high-ranking officials and dignitaries of the capital. Both the Prince of Jian's mansion and the Shin residence were among the invitees. Qin Yan had official business to attend to that day, but when he heard I was going out, he made a point of personally seeing me to the rear courtyard of the Liu residence before heading to the magistrate's office. Perhaps he feels guilty about what happened on our wedding night. He's been treating me very well these past few days. When we returned to the family home, my father, as was customary, remarked that my daughter had caused you some trouble. Qin Yan hastened to heap a whole basketful of praise on me, calling me beautiful, intelligent, virtuous, and kind, which made my stepmother feel a pang of envy. She thought of Wan Sherlan, who had married Prince Jian, and shot me several withering glances. Seeing how highly I was regarded, the servants at the Wan residence began to treat me with a little more respect. On the way back, just as I was about to thank Qin Yan, he bowed to me and said, "I haven't properly thanked you. Madam, Ji Lu is so headstrong. If it weren't for your kindness and generosity, you would surely have punished her long ago. She lost her father at a young age and grew up in our home. After both my parents passed away, I raised her myself, and I suppose I spoiled her a bit too much. When she saw me getting married, she thought I was going to abandon her. She couldn't accept it right away, which is why that whole farce happened." I waved my hand to indicate it was all in the past. Everything I said that night came from the heart. We were just strangers back then. If you were to punish your only relative, the cousin you raised yourself just for my sake, I'd actually think you were heartless. I looked up and met his gaze, then said slowly, "My husband, not all married couples in this world need to treat each other with the utmost deference. If we are not meant to share such a bond, treating each other with mutual respect is fine as well. If you can continue to be like this today, you will be the perfect husband I have always sought." He seemed deeply moved by these words and bowed to me once more with great solemnity. "How unworthy am I, Shen, to have married a woman such as you. With your kind words, I will do my utmost to treat you well from now on." He certainly kept his word. Lately, everyone in the capital has been saying that the top scholar Shen holds his wife in such high regard. Not only has he given me free rein to manage the household, but he has also turned down 2 concubines sent by his superiors, remaining devoted to me alone. Seeing how he presented the gift to me today only confirmed everyone's suspicions, and they all teased me with envious glances, making for quite a lively scene. Just then, an announcement was made that a distinguished guest had arrived at the Prince Jian's mansion. A maidservant carefully escorted Princess Jian into the room, and following obediently behind her was none other than Wan Sherlan, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. Even though Prince Jian held little power these days, he was still a member of the imperial family. So when the others saw the princess consort of Jian arrive in person, they all hurried over to greet her warmly. I stood a short distance away and observed her. Just as in my previous life, this princess was dignified and graceful in public, without a single flaw. but what they didn't know was just how venomous she really was behind their backs. After exchanging pleasantries with everyone, Princess Jian gave Wan Shilan a subtle nod, signaling that she could go explore on her own. Wan Shilan, who had been standing by her side attentively, quickly stepped away to talk to someone else. Little did they know that everyone was well aware of Prince Jian's current standing. They figured they'd just brush off the princess consort and be done with it, not bothering to pay her any further attention. Before she was married, she always outshone me in social settings because she was the legitimate daughter. This was the first time she had treated me so coldly, and I was so angry my face turned red. She quickly spotted me and rushed straight toward me. After coming to a stop in front of me, Wan Shilan affectionately took my arm and said with feigned concern, "It's been a long time since I've seen you. Sister, I hear your husband treats you with great respect. But you shouldn't be so busy with household matters. You really ought to make time to give your husband a child soon." She knew full well that Xinyan hadn't stayed the night on our wedding night, and that Ji Lu would certainly try to stop us from consummating our marriage. By saying those things, she was just trying to rub salt in the wound and embarrass me. I took her hand in mine and said sincerely, "You're right, my dear. It's just that the housekeeper has such a hard time. It's truly a headache. I actually envy you for not having to deal with these trivial matters." When I mentioned her becoming a concubine, her face suddenly turned pale, and she yanked her hand away from mine. Her face twisted with rage, and her voice was thick with bitterness. "Humph, Wan Shijia, don't think you're off the hook just because you're acting magnanimous now. That cousin is the apple of Xinyan's eye. You'll never measure up to her in his heart. No matter how many lifetimes you live, just wait and see. You'll end up alone for the rest of your life." I didn't pick up on her remark, but spoke as if by chance. Princess Consort Jian has long been known for her kindness. She's always been very considerate of her concubines. I'm sure you're living quite comfortably under her care. As I spoke, I glanced at her arms. Ever since she walked in, I'd noticed that they'd been trembling slightly. I know that was Princess Jane's doing. She had her concubines hold teacups and serve her tea for several hours, though her arms felt as if they were about to fall off. There was not a single visible mark on her skin, and her reputation remained completely unscathed. When she heard what I said, she was so angry that she couldn't think of a retort. So she actually tried to hit me. Just then, Princess Jian happened to glance over. Her eyes flickered, but she lowered her hand, shot me a fierce glare, and hurried back to the princess's side. I watched her walk away and snorted derisively. "Wan Shilan, this is what I endured in my previous life as the so-called imperial consort. Now, I'm giving it all to you." After returning from the Liu residence, life went on as usual. I make 2 rounds a day, morning and evening, to check whether the servants are doing their jobs diligently. The rest of the time, I review the ledgers, both those for the estate and my own. Whenever Xinyan had a day off, I would go to his study to report on the recent accounts, and gradually I became a regular visitor there. I gradually realized that Xinyan was exactly as I had expected. A good official. His desk was piled high with endless official business, and even when his attendants complained that this wasn't his responsibility, he would always gently cut them off. "Since I receive your salary, it is my duty to share your burdens. There is no question of whether I should or shouldn't. Besides, if I handle the matter myself, I will always feel more at ease." He never believed that a woman's virtue lay in her lack of talent. Whenever I visited his study, he would hand me a book, whether it was a political treatise or a history, and if there was anything I didn't understand, he would put aside whatever he was doing and patiently explain it to me. He said these books help people understand principles and broaden their horizons. If I read more of them, I'll be able to run my business even better in the future. Whenever he had a spare moment, he loved to brew a pot of tea himself and chat with me about everything under the sun. I told him about how Grandpa and Grandma had traveled far and wide doing business in their younger days, and he listened intently, often expressing his admiration. Once, he and I remarked that Xiaonyang was truly a remarkable woman. She had a knack for business and a sharp mind. In fact, she was better at business than I am. It's just a pity that, because she was born into a merchant family, she could only be a concubine. But he looked at me with a serious expression and retorted, "People should not be judged by the prestige of their professions. If there were no peddlers traveling from town to town, the world would surely fall into chaos. The fact that my mother-in-law, who came from a merchant family, was able to achieve such great success only serves to demonstrate how exceptional she is. For you, madam, to have such a mother is the greatest source of pride in the world." I stared at him blankly. Ever since I was a child, everyone had mocked my background, even when I tried to refute each comment. I couldn't stop the subtle and overt jibes. This is the first time someone has told me this so earnestly, and I'm proud of it. I looked at his face. His features were as beautiful as a painting. A smile played at the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were earnest and sincere, making anyone who looked at him feel as if they were basking in a spring breeze. He really is a fine young man. My little cousin was still very wary of me, though she didn't throw a fit like she did on her wedding night. Xinyan had her move into the guest house, so we saw each other even less often. He told me in private that Ji Lu was 12 in age when children aren't yet disciplined and asked me to be patient with her. He also said he was keeping an eye out for a good family to marry her into and asked me to help look around. Everything seemed calm on the surface, but I felt increasingly uneasy inside. I clearly remember that in my previous life, the crown prince was accused of treason and deposed, and the Shin family was wiped out overnight. Although the crown prince was eventually exonerated, the emperor was already gravely ill and on his deathbed. Yu Yun, who by then had been made Prince Jian, seized the opportunity to seize the throne, and Xinyan was never reinstated. At that time, I was being tortured in Prince Jian's mansion. All I thought about each day was how to avoid being beaten as much as possible, so I didn't pay much attention to these matters. Now, I can only recall a few minor details. Having just been reborn, I used to find this issue quite easy to handle after all. With money to fall back on, I wouldn't have to suffer any hardships. But the longer I live with Xinyan, the more I hope to change his fate as well. A noble gentleman like him deserves a happy ending. As for villains like Yu Yun and Princess Jian, they don't deserve to hold such high positions. Lately, I've been racking my brain to bring it up with Xinyan both directly and indirectly on numerous occasions. At first, Xinyan thought I was joking, but after I mentioned it so many times, he started taking it seriously and told me they'd keep an eye out for any unusual activity. And so, after days and days of anxious waiting, the news finally arrived as expected. The commander of Sichuan sent a secret letter to the crown prince, intending to use his troops to stage a rebellion. The emperor was furious and immediately ordered the crown prince to be imprisoned in the imperial prison. After what happened, Xinyan only rushed home once to tell me not to worry, then hurried out again and never came back. As I waited anxiously, a servant came to announce that the consort of Prince Jian had arrived. Now that the crown prince has been imprisoned, the Prince of Ning is the most likely candidate to succeed to the throne, which is why he has recently been the focus of much attention. Meanwhile, the Prince of Jian, who has been maintaining close private ties with the Prince of Ning, has likewise become a figure of great influence. It was obvious why Wan Sherlan had come at this moment. "Think you can make a fool of me? It won't be that easy." I composed myself and called out to the servants, "Welcome the guests." As soon as she stepped into the main hall, before she could even make out who was there, she heard the jingling of ornaments. As she drew near, my eyes stung. Wan Sherlan was dressed quite flamboyantly today. Her head looked as if she were wearing the entire Prince Jian's mansion. It was densely packed with hairpins and ornaments, leaving not a single gap. Her dress was a vivid pink, embroidered all over with birds, butterflies, and flowers, as if someone had pasted an entire book of floral patterns onto it. Before I could say a word, she pulled up a chair and sat down, then said with a smirk, "You look quite haggard. Sister, I suppose you're worried about your husband. Oh my, what a pity, brand new top scholar getting mixed up in this mess. What on earth are you going to do now? I'm afraid you'll have to go live with him in some remote mountain wilderness." I took a sip of tea and said calmly, "His Majesty will surely render a just verdict. He will not allow the innocent to suffer wrongfully, nor will he let the troublemakers go unpunished." Hearing my half-hearted response only made her more excited. I know you're in a bad mood, sister, but don't just dwell on your anger. You should think of other options. For instance, if you were to kneel before me today, bow your head, and beg for forgiveness, I might consider letting you off the hook. You could stay in the capital and work as a street vendor, instead of having to follow Xinyan into exile. I set down my tea, walked over to Wan Sherlan, said nothing, and simply reached out to place my hand firmly on her lower back. To an outsider, it looked as if we sisters were about to share a secret in close intimacy, but only I knew that the moment my hand touched her waist. Her face turned pale with pain. That was the part of my body Yuyan beat the most. In my previous life, if things didn't go his way, he'd slap me across the lower back. When he was really angry, he'd just grab a stick and beat me with it. Judging by Wan Sherlan's reaction, he feels the same way now. She came to brag to me even though she'd just been beaten to a pulp. I really don't know if my younger sister is just mean or just stupid. My grip gradually tightened. Wan Sherlan could take no more. She suddenly sprang to her feet and lunged at me. But the servants rushed over and pulled her away. I looked at her, feeling a wave of disgust wash over me. Even though she was suffering herself, she still chose to be an accomplice and hurt others. Someone like that doesn't deserve pity. If one's virtue does not match one's position, disaster is sure to follow. Wan Sherlan, just you wait and see. Someone like Yuyan is bound to meet a terrible end. With that, not wanting to get into another argument with her, I simply motioned to a servant to escort her out. After Wan Sherlan left, I was still feeling restless. So I simply ordered the servants to tidy up the mansion. Lately, everyone in the Shin household has been on edge. Rather than letting them run wild with speculation, it would be better to keep them busy with some tasks that way. They might temporarily forget their current worries. I was ready to get down to business as well, so I had the maid bring out the ledgers that had been piling up for days, rolled up my sleeves, and dove right in. Before I knew it, it was already evening. Just as I was about to take a break and prepare dinner, I suddenly heard the gatekeeper announce that Xinyan had returned. He still looked as gentle as ever, though there was a noticeable look of weariness on his face. Before I could say a word, he said softly, "Don't worry, at least His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is out of danger now." I patted my chest. Thank goodness at least I'm still alive. Things have turned out differently from how they did for the Crown Prince in my previous life. So surely the others can change their fate too. Relieved, I forced a smile. You've been running around so much these past few days, my lord. I'm sure you haven't been eating properly. Well, then, let's have a meal together. Just then, a servant burst into the main hall and reported loudly, "My lord, my lady, I have urgent news to report." Xinyan recognized the man as a servant from the annex and furrowed his brow slightly. Has something happened to my cousin? The man pulled a stack of letters from his coat, and upon closer inspection, they turned out to be highly confidential official documents. I was carrying out the mistress's orders to inspect and tidy up the premises when, to my surprise, I discovered my cousin's personal maid sneaking out late at night. I detained her and, to my astonishment, found these items on her. So I hurried to bring them here to report to my lord and mistress. Given the gravity of the situation, I couldn't afford to avoid any appearance of impropriety regarding Ji Lu, so I quickly ordered, "Bring her up immediately." When Ji Lu came over, she was still sobbing. She shot me a furious glance and, as usual, turned to Xinyan for comfort only to be met this time with his icy stare. "Get down on your knees." It was a voice filled with utter disappointment. Ji Liushai suddenly became agitated. "Cousin, I'm doing all this for your own good. Don't let that slut Wan Shijiao fool you." Xinyan's face was as stern as stone, and in a rare move, he interrupted the other person to speak up himself. "Did you do it? Did anyone tell you to do it?" Ji Lu had stopped crying in fright and was now stealing glances at Xinyan as she carefully weighed her words. "The Prince of Jian's concubine came to the mansion today and sent her confidant to tell me that Wan Shijia cares only about her own freedom and doesn't give a damn about your well-being. Now that the Crown Prince is in prison, She's still letting you run around tirelessly, she's unlikely to meet a good end herself. Why not secure a way out? If you just hand over some of your official documents to her, she can vouch for your safety before the Prince of Jian. Cousin. I'm acting out of genuine concern for you, didn't you trust me? Smack. Her response was a resounding slap across the face. She had never felt so wronged in her entire life. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she covered the side of her face that had been slapped, shouting, Cousin. What kind of love potion has Wan Shijia given you? What's so great about that slut? The moment she walked in, you stopped paying any attention to me. I'm the one who loves you the most. That slut is nothing but a stray dog that's wandered in. Just because she flatters you a little, you've fallen for her. Pfft, you filthy thing. Smack. Before she could finish speaking, Qin Yan rushed forward and slapped her across the other cheek. Before I could even react, there was a loud smack. Qin Yan had actually slapped himself hard across the face. I saw his lips trembling slightly and his teeth grinding, clearly furious. So I hurriedly handed him a cup of tea. He took the cup and spoke slowly. The first of the 3 slaps I'm giving you today is for betraying the teachings your parents, I, and your husband have imparted to you over all these years. A gentleman must conduct himself with integrity. By associating with someone like the king of Jian's concubine and consorting with her, you've lost every trace of the dignity one would expect from someone who has studied the classics. The second slap is for your disrespect toward your sister-in-law. Ever since Shijia married into the Shin family, she has shown you every possible kindness. Always looking out for you and never holding a grudge. Repeatedly forgiving you. Yet you've spoken so harshly, cursing her with filthy language. This slap is my way of teaching you a lesson on her behalf. The third slap was for myself for letting you get this far. I always thought you were still young. And since you have no other family, it's just the 2 of us relying on each other for survival. That's why I treated you so well. And even when you did something wrong, I couldn't bring myself to scold you. As a result, not only did I let you develop ideas you shouldn't have, but I also raised you to become the irredeemable person you are today. Upon hearing this, Ji Lu was already shaking like a leaf. She staggered over, trying to grab the hem of Qin Yan's robe, her face streaked with tears and snot. Seeing this, Qin Yan didn't back down as he usually did. Instead, he took 2 steps back to put some distance between them, and spoke as if he had made up his mind. I'll send you to the village, where you can reflect on your mistakes in peace. Once you've come to your senses, I'll naturally find you a good home. However, by acting this way, you've severed our sibling bond. From now on, don't call me cousin, and I will no longer consider you my cousin. With that, he waved for the servants to take Ji Lu away and turned his back on her. Yet even after she had been led out of the Shin residence, her voice calling out to her cousin could still be heard from above. Harrowing, tragic, desperate. It wasn't until the sound gradually faded away and could no longer be heard that the man beside me finally looked at the cup of tea, which had gone cold, and let out a long sigh. I knew he must be feeling terrible right now, so I stayed by his side in silence. After a long while, he finally came to his senses a little. You must be hungry. I'll have someone warm up some food. The dinner took much longer than we had expected, and neither of us could really enjoy it. After a few hurried bites, we had the table cleared. I spoke up first. Today, I failed to secure the entrance properly, allowing intruders to slip in. From now on, I will redouble my vigilance and ensure that what happened today never happens again. He offered a faint, reassuring smile. How can one guard against someone who has already set their heart on evil? As for the things she said to you today, I'm sorry. I haven't disciplined her properly. Her private dealings with your legitimate younger sister are, after all, a matter for the inner quarters. I'm afraid you'll have to take care of wrapping things up. Never mind. I'll replace everyone around Ji Lu. I won't let people like that stay in the Shin household. As for Wan Shirlan, I'll be extra careful. The next time she comes calling, I'll make sure to turn her away whenever possible. If I hadn't been wary of her status as the Prince of Jian's concubine today, I would have. As I said this, I suddenly felt like I'd hit upon something crucial. The Prince of Jian's concubine. The Prince of Jian. After quickly running through the numbers in my head, I tentatively spoke up. My lord, I have an idea that might help resolve His Royal Highness the Crown Prince's current predicament. Qin Yan turned toward me and listened intently as I explained my plan. His eyes lit up instantly. And he suddenly stood up and bowed to me. With her intelligence and strategic mind, she could be a general. With that, he hurried out to discuss the preparations with others. The very next day, the maid who had tipped off Ji Lu and Wan Sherlan was dragged straight before the emperor. The girl had never seen such a scene before. She was so frightened she could barely speak, rambling incoherently. Even so, His Majesty understood. The consort of Prince Jian had asked Xinyan's cousin to secretly smuggle out documents related to Xinyan's official duties. The emperor did not know who Wan Sherlan or Ji Lu were, but he knew the Prince of Jian. He knew Xinyan. And he knew that Xinyan was a close friend of the Crown Prince. That's enough. The emperor immediately sent someone to reprimand Prince Jian, and a few days later, news arrived from the imperial palace that the Crown Prince had been reinstated. As for Wan Sherlan, she must have gotten another good beating. When one traces the root cause of these recent incidents, whether it was the decision to depose the Crown Prince based on hearsay, the promotion of the Prince of Ning without granting him the position of Crown Prince, or even the recent restoration of the Crown Prince, they all stem from the emperor's suspicion. He was old and in poor health. Like a setting sun, he saw everyone as a threat and could only cling tightly to the power in his hands, afraid to let go even a little. So when he heard the maid's words, it was bound to strike a nerve. The matter of the deposed Crown Prince was already intricately linked to Prince Jian, and with Wan Sherlan's foolish blunder adding fuel to the fire, it would only tip the scales further in Prince Jian's favor in the emperor's mind. I told Xinyan all of this, word for word, but there are still some things I cannot bring myself to say. After the Crown Prince was stripped of his title in his previous life, Prince Ning set his sights on the throne. Seeing that the Crown Prince remained in prison without punishment, he took it upon himself to send men to forge an imperial edict ordering the Crown Prince to take his own life. When the news broke, the court and the people were in an uproar. The emperor, enraged, exiled Prince Ning to a remote region and built the Tower of Longing for his son, where he spent day and night mourning the Crown Prince. After this incident, not only was Prince Jian not implicated because of his relationship with Prince Ning, but his status actually improved. After all, he was the first to inform the emperor of the news that the Prince of Ning had forged an imperial edict. Just thinking about Yu Yun's two-faced attitude makes me so sick I could throw up. Since fate has given me a second chance, I'm determined to stop him. The emperor's suspicion, his feelings toward the Crown Prince. I haven't let the memories of my past life go to waste. Now that Yu Yun's defeat is certain, this time, it's finally my turn to get one step ahead of him. However, I still overlooked something important, which nearly ruined everything for me. That is Yu Yun's ambition. Ever since then, whenever I think back on that incident, I can't help but slap my thigh in regret. When Yu Yun launched his coup in his previous life, I always assumed he had it in the bag, but I overlooked the fact that anyone capable of such a thing must be a schemer at heart. So on that day, Xinyan had gone out on official business and hadn't returned all night. I got up as usual to give the servants their orders, but suddenly there was a commotion at the main gate. To my surprise, I heard the sound of heavily armored soldiers approaching. I instinctively stood up, my heart pounding wildly. Before long, the main gate was kicked open, and a squad of soldiers poured in, quickly subduing the household servants. At the rear of the formation stood Wan Sherlan, dressed in her finest attire. She wore a smug, defiant smile, walked with even more swagger, and seemed to scream, "Look at me," from head to toe. As for the outfit she was wearing today, I'll never forget it, even if it were reduced to ashes. Those were the luxurious robes of a consort I wore in my previous life. She waved her hand at both sides of the line, and immediately two men stepped forward, kicking me twice in the stomach and pinning me to the ground. Wan Sherlan's shrill laughter erupted at that moment, and it wasn't until a full 15 minutes later that she finally stopped laughing. "Sister, sister, What's the point of all your scheming and scheming for so long? Fate is predetermined by heaven. In my past life, I made a mistake and let you get the better of me, but heaven has seen it all and given me another chance. In this life, I am destined to be a consort, while you lowly little slut, no matter how hard you try, are destined to be trampled under my feet. No sooner had she said that than she actually reached out and stomped hard on my head, making a loud thud. My world spun violently for a moment. And then the pain hit me. My face was pressed against the rough ground. My skin was scraped raw, oozing tiny drops of blood, and my entire face was throbbing with a stinging pain, as if it were being burned. As if that weren't enough, Wan Sherlan kept grinding her foot over my head, cursing non-stop as she did so. My vision slowly blurred with blood until I could see nothing clearly. I don't know how long it was, but after she'd had her fill, Wan Sherlan woke me from my stupor. It was like a bucket of cold water dumped over my head. I didn't expect this actually pretty tough. Managing to hold back without making a sound. How boring. I've had enough of this. Here's the deal. Do as I say, and I'll put you out of your misery. I collapsed onto the ground. The stinging pain on my face still tormenting me. The abrasions caused by my skin rubbing against the ground were small but numerous. And the pain was so excruciating it felt like a knife piercing my heart and eating away at my bone so unbearable that I almost felt it would be better to die than to live. But having been given a second chance at life, was this really how I was meant to end up? No, no matter what. I have to survive. Right now, there's only one option. To do everything I can to buy time. I cleared my throat, looked up, and said calmly, "What do you want me to do?" "Oh, that's a surprise. I thought you'd be one of those stubborn ones who'd hold out until the very end. But it turns out you do know when to give in." The smile on her face widened, and the malice in her voice was practically spilling over. "Crawl over here," shouting long live the Imperial consort all the way. "Crawl right to my feet. And I'll have them put you out of your misery. Hang in there, Wan Shurjia. You have to survive." Though the distance was short, it felt as vast as the Milky Way separating the cowherd and the weaving maid. I don't know how I managed to crawl to Wan Sherlan's feet. The moment I touched the hem of her skirt, I nearly fainted all over again. "You did great, sis. Now I'm interested again. So I'm sorry, I take back what I said earlier." As she spoke, she leaned down to look at me, still wearing that repulsive expression. But at that moment, all I could see was her gleaming white neck. This is the moment I've been waiting for. In an instant, all the strength left in my body surged through me. I grabbed Wan Sherlan by the throat and pulled her to the ground. And in the blink of an eye, the tables had turned. Seeing this, the soldiers immediately charged at me with their weapons raised. I tightened my grip and shouted at them, "Step back, or I'll kill her." Wan Sherlan also struggled to wave her arms, signaling for them to step back quickly. I didn't dare to ease my grip. And the situation reached a stalemate. What should I do now? Should I just go down with her? Just as my mind was wandering, there was a sudden loud bang at the door. The noise was even louder than when Wan Sherlan had stormed through the gate earlier. It sounded as if they were about to tear the door down. I assumed Prince Jian had sent reinforcements after Wan Sherlan failed to return. A wave of despair washed over me, and I braced myself for the worst. The door finally gave way under the weight and crashed to the ground. To everyone's surprise, the figure striding toward them at the head of the troops was none other than Shen Yan. The men he had brought surrounded Prince Jian's soldiers, and Wan Sherlan was also taken away by them. In an instant, the vast main hall was left with only the two of us. I looked up at Shen Yan and tried to force a smile, but the movement tugged at my wound, causing me to gasp in pain. Before I knew it, I found myself in a warm embrace. I'd just had a bucket of cold water dumped on me, and the sudden chill sent a shiver down my spine. I patted his shoulder, intending to go change my clothes. But he held me even tighter. The force was so intense it felt as if it were fusing me into his very being, leaving me utterly unable to break free. He must have been running frantically for quite some time. The part of his shirt I was holding onto was damp, and his forehead pressed against my shoulder, was covered in a fine sheen of sweat. His breathing was still uneven and labored. We were so close that I could almost hear his heart beating thump. Thump. We held each other like that for a very long time, so long that the fabric on my shoulder gradually became soaked through with tears. I've seen this man when he's gentle and playful, when he's full of vigor and confidence, and when he's angry and furious, but this is the first time in my life I've ever seen him weeping bitterly for my sake. I gently patted him on the back. Don't blame yourself or feel bad. Wan Sherlan has hated me with a passion for a long time. What happened today wasn't your fault. He no lo. Inger tried to hide the tears in his voice. He burst into tears like a child. I heard him reply to me through his sobs. Yet every word rang out crystal clear in my ears. I'm sorry. But I'm not sad because I've dragged you into this. I hate myself for failing to protect the one I love. This is the first time I've been asked out in my 2 lifetimes. Right after that, I heard my own voice. Then there's no need to feel sad. The reason I've managed to hold on this long is that I've always believed my beloved would come to save me. You did it. Xin Yan. The last time I heard anything about Wan Sherlan was from Xin Yan. After they took her away that day, she continued to hurl insults. The general in charge of her guard had a short temper. After enduring her abuse for quite some time, he could no longer stand it. He had her bound and dragged to the gates of Prince Jian's mansion to persuade her to surrender. It is said that Yu Yan did not even show his face. The only thing that greeted Wan Sherlan was a volley of arrows. I heard that even as she was on her deathbed, she kept muttering the word consort. She's right, everyone has their own fate. And since she's committed so many wrongdoings and shows no remorse, she deserves this fate. Although the rebellion was quelled, the emperor's condition worsened due to a combination of shock and anger. And he passed away. The crown prince ascended the throne, promoted Xin Yan to Minister of Personnel, and bestowed an imperial decree upon me. Before going to the palace to express her gratitude, Xin Yan sat by the window, carefully drawing my eyebrows. No matter how difficult or complicated the official business might be, I had never seen him look so nervous. When I saw his hands trembling slightly, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Seeing that he couldn't finish the drawing, he simply tossed aside the eyebrow pencil and gently traced his finger down my nose. You little rascal. What's so funny? I wrapped my arms around his neck with a smile and gave his handsome cheek a playful peck. Seeing his face flush instantly, I said with satisfaction, I wasn't laughing at you. It's just that while you were drawing my eyebrows, I suddenly thought of the saying, don't rely on your stunning beauty. Instead, find a loving husband. That really is a good saying. My husband is even better than Zhang Cheng, who used to draw his wife's eyebrows every day. Our marriage will be 100 times happier than theirs. We're both young, let's make the most of our time together. That's the end of the story. Thank you all for reading. See you in the next one.